Good morning, ladies. How many of you guys are so excited to be here this morning? Awesome. My name is Yelena with Elevate Entertainment, and I'm super excited to be your guys' DJ this evening. As I mentioned earlier, we will have multiple breaks throughout the evening where you guys can mingle with the ladies at the other tables and also have a chance to grab some photos at the photo booth. But just to start things off, can I please ask you guys all to put your hands together to help me welcome our official MC for this evening, Miss Logan Aguirre.
Got nothing in my brain. That's what people say. That's what people say.
Hi. They put me in charge of turning on my own mic, which was a mistake. So anyway, I've got it now. Hello. Welcome to our 5th annual Ladies Who Launch. If I haven't met you, I'm Logan Aguirre, publisher and owner of Biz 417. Today is my favorite day of the year. Anybody else? Yes? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you guys are here today. I am so excited because I know what's in store for you, and you have a really good day ahead. I know you guys, you're busy, you've got a lot going on, you're doing this for you. You've blocked your whole day, right? The whole rest of your day. You got your tickets early, or maybe you were on the wait list. We won't tell. You waited, but you're here. And you guys, you have an agenda. You want to connect, you want to learn something, and you want to have fun. Am I right? Yes? Okay, so we're going to deliver on those 3 things today. I know it can be really hard to walk into a room of 500 women, many of who might seem like strangers. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about talking to strangers. I'm going to tell you a little story. Are you guys ready for a story? Okay. Did any of you grow up reading a book like this called Never Talk to Strangers? We read it every night before my first day of school. Let me read you the first little part. If you are hanging from a trapeze and up sneaks a camel with bony knees, remember this rule, if you please, never talk to strangers. These were the words running through my head on my first day of school. It was the 80s, so on your first day of school in the 80s, your mom put you on the bus. Did anyone in this room put their kids on the bus the first day of school? Well, Joan's raising her hand because she's my mom. But in the 80s, that's just what you did. So we practiced about the first day of school. We practiced the strategy for getting home, and that was that I would get off the bus when my neighbor Misty got off the bus. Okay, Misty's like 8 years old, and I think she ate toothpaste. I don't really remember, but she was the shepherd, the trusted shepherd to get me home. You have to know that when I was 5 years old, I had a lazy eye. And so I had to wear an eye patch. And the eye patch went on the eye that I could actually see out of in order to make the lazy eye stop being lazy. But I couldn't hardly see out of the lazy eye. So here I am, kind of blind, my first day of school, trying to navigate my way home. I get to school just fine. I have a really good first day. I get on the bus at the end of the day. I see Misty. She gets on the bus behind me. I've totally got this. We're bouncing along, and I'm looking out the window with the one eye that I can kind of see out of. And all of a sudden, the bus stops, and here Misty comes blowing by me. I'm like, oh, my gosh. So I get my backpack, and I'm running down the little aisle, and then she goes down, and so I go down, and we get off, and the bus driver closes the door, and bus pulls away, and Misty turns around, and even with only kind of one good eye, I can tell that ain't Misty. And she kind of looks down at me and is like, who's this kid I've never seen before? So she goes home. And I start looking around. Did you see the fringe? It's good, right? And I realize I'm lost. And I see a woman a few driveways over. She's washing her car. And I have no poker face, so she can tell something's wrong. And she gestures me over. Never talk to strangers. But I don't really know what else to do, so I go over to her, and she starts asking me all the questions I'm not supposed to answer. What's your name? Where do you live? What's your mom's name? What's your phone number? What's your address? And I see I have no other option, so I cave and I tell her everything. And she says, I know right where that is. Jump in the car and I'll take you. Not only are you never supposed to talk to strangers, but the book specifically addresses not getting in their car. But I miss my mom and I have to pee, and I'm like, okay, fine. So I get in the car. And luckily, she gets me home. As we're pulling in the driveway, my mom's backing out. She's got my little brother in the car. They're coming to find me. Because at this point, they've realized Misty's gotten off the bus without me. My favorite part of the story is that the very next day, my mom put me right back on the bus. You can't do better till you know better, right? How are we going to learn anything if we don't try again? But that's a whole other leadership talk. What I want you to think about today is that we've been trained not to talk to strangers, but today is all about talking to strangers. It's okay to talk to strangers. Don't get in their car, but it's okay to talk to strangers. Are we good with that? Okay, so growing up, we moved a lot. I was the new kid 7 times between kindergarten and 10th grade. So I got pretty good at talking to strangers. So I'm going to give you a couple tactics throughout the day today to help you guys. The first thing, when you're the new kid in the 80s and they don't make sure you have an assigned seat at lunch so that you would have built-in people to sit with, you have to charm somebody enough by lunch for them to ask you to sit with them. You do this by finding a point of connection. You do this by observing, asking questions, finding something that you can latch onto with that person that you connect on, and immediately you can build that rapport. Finding a point of connection is so key, and I'm going to encourage you today to try to do that without asking something like, how are you? And without saying, good, just super busy. One question I like to ask is, how's your world? When you ask somebody about their world, they start to think about stuff bigger than them. Maybe you're going to hear about their kids or their job or their hobby. You can also ask, do you have anything exciting coming up? Then you might learn about a life event or a vacation, something cool that they're working on. So as you move throughout the day today, talk to a stranger, try to ask them some good questions, and make a new friend. We got it? Okay. So let's talk about what we've got going on today. I want to introduce all of our sponsors because we have some amazing sponsors with us, and I want to make sure that I specifically call them out. You're going to meet them throughout the day here up at the podium. First, from Volt Credit Union, for our 5th year as having Volt as our presenting sponsor, we have Loretta Roney, President and CEO. Hi, Loretta. She has some great teammates here today. Hopefully you've seen their super fun backdrop back here, so make sure you get a photo there today. We'll hear from Loretta a little bit later. Loretta has made it possible for you guys to hear from our keynote, Catherine Price, later today. Forvis. Hey, where are my Forvis ladies? Come on, girls. Yay! If Forvis is unfamiliar to you, that's because they were previously BKD, but on June 1st, they had a merger, announced their new name, and Forvis is led locally here in Springfield by a team of 14 female partners and managing directors. Let's hear it for that. Today from Forvis, I want to specifically say hi to Carly Taft, Marketing and Business Development Manager, Kristen Wanamaker-Bright, Partner, and Crystal Creech, Director. Hopefully right now on your table you've seen your Connect 4 card. So they're all about building connections today, and you can find connections 4 different ways, up, down, horizontally, turn it into them by the end of the day. So make sure you check that card out. Back for our 4th year as a sponsor is Mercy. Have our Mercy table over there. Thank you. In your bag, you'll have a bookmark for Mercy. Okay, so look in your bag for this, and you're going to fill in one healthy habit on the back. Take it to see the crew at Mercy, and make sure you participate in their Take Time for You board. So we've got a fun integration there with Mercy. And today I want to say hello to Marie Moore, Chief Nursing Officer for Mercy Springfield. Aaliyah Aldridge, Executive Director of Mercy Health Foundation Springfield, and Jennifer Murray, Executive Director of Nursing for Springfield. So hello, and we'll hear from Jennifer a little bit later. We have Husch Blackwell back again as a sponsor this year. Hello, Husch women. Good to see you. Get with them today and check out their qualities of a leader integration. So we have a word cloud of some of our favorite leadership adjectives, so see which one fits you best. Today we have Ginger Gooch that will be talking to us from Husch, so thank you so much. We have tons of supporting sponsors that I want to thank. Reliable Lexus, they've got the beautiful cars and flower installation, so hopefully you've seen that. Rosie, thank you, they're sponsoring our rosé later. Elevate Entertainment, we've got Alina, she's doing an awesome job for us today. Dreamy and Darling Creations and Queen City Blooms have helped make the room look like it does. Jonathan and Audrey and their team from Grooms, supplying all the furniture in here and out in the lounge. So if you do need to take a break, answer some emails, we do have a lounge in the lobby for you. And the Rug Fashion Store brought in these awesome rugs. Okay, today when you hear some things that really click with you, please share them on social using the hashtag 417ladieswholaunch so we can make everyone else feel really jealous who isn't in the room today. Just kidding. Okay, are you guys ready to jump in? Awesome. Our first segment today is sponsored by Husch Blackwell, a leader in providing industry-specific legal insight. We're so pleased to welcome Husch Blackwell partner Ginger Gooch here, and she'll tell us more about Husch Blackwell and introduce our first speaker. Help me welcome to the stage Ginger Gooch.
Ladies, on behalf of the women of Husch Blackwell, we're so pleased to welcome you to the event today and introduce our speaker, Melissa Barnes. Many of you last year had the opportunity to hear from our firm chair, Catherine Hanaway. It has been awesome to spend my entire career at a firm that values women and their contributions. For those of you who don't know, we're a full-service law firm. We litigate cases, we draft contracts, we provide employment counseling. We have an awesome group of women, and indulge me for just a couple of seconds and taking a minute to introduce them to you. And not all of them could be here today, but if you are here, please stand. Other attorneys that I work with are Lauren Hawkins, Laura Green, Lauren Haskins, Laura Robinson, Danielle Reed, Amanda Timmons, who is supposed to be here doing this and is dealing with family sickness, so shout out to her on the on-demand broadcast. Our summer associate, Audrey Pauls, and our office administrator, Kara Eichenberger. And they're not standing, but they're right here. Turning to our speaker today, Melissa Barnes. Amanda and I were talking about Melissa's topic of radical candor. As lawyers, we are very familiar with radical candor. We deal with it every day. It's critical that we're honest with clients, that we're clear, that we provide good advice to them and often have difficult conversations. And even though I've been doing that with clients for over 2 decades now, it is still very difficult, and it's very difficult to do that in personal relationships and in leadership relationships when you're managing other people and dealing with coworkers. So I'm super excited personally to hear what Melissa has to say today and tips she may have about how to make those situations easier. Melissa worked her way up through PR firms in New York City. She was a senior VP at Fleischman Hillard when she transferred to Twitter in 2020. She is currently Vice President Latin America and Canada of Twitter. She manages the Twitter teams in that region with a focus on expanding advertising revenues, driving innovation, and building Twitter's brand. She attended the J School at MU, so from one tiger to another, go Tigers, and join me in welcoming Melissa Barnes.
Okay. Oh, good. The microphone works. We were worried about that. So first of all, it's so great to be in front of this group. You are the first large room I've been in front of since COVID. And I had a baby about 7 months ago, so it's also sort of the first big event that I've done since coming back from maternity leave. So thank you for being a wonderful group to be in front of. I love being in front of a room full of women. So as mentioned, I'm going to talk about radical candor today. But the title of my talk is this idea of being a work in progress. I hope when I look back in 20 years at where I am today, I'm a better leader and a better person than I am today. I really believe that the best leaders I've ever met are people who practice self-awareness. They're constantly looking at how they do and sort of calibrating the room to understand from the people around them, are we winning here? Am I the person that's doing what you need? And how can I be better? They're constantly asking people to tell them, how can I be better? And when I look at my best lessons as a leader, no surprise, most of them have come from my toughest moments. Before we talk about my lessons, I think we have to start at the beginning. So I grew up in a small town in northern Idaho. It was a college town. And it was a wonderful place to grow up. It's something that you see in Hallmark movies in terms of the people on the street knowing everyone that you meet. They're related to you in some way, or they know your parents in some way. The great thing about growing up in a college town is that you're surrounded by people who are subject matter experts. They're teaching geology, hydrology. You could be at a cocktail party and somebody will talk to you about avian migration patterns. Sometimes that's great, sometimes less so, depending if you're stuck in the corner. What it bred in me was this lifelong passion for curiosity. What I found is that when you are talking to somebody who is really interested in what they do, they can be very interesting. Curiosity has probably been one of the greatest things that has helped me as I think about when I go into rooms like this and I ask questions, because you learn a lot. But about this photo. So I also grew up as the only girl. Brothers, boy cousins, all of my parents' college friends had sons. Every kid in the neighborhood was a boy. I'm pretty sure when I was born, there was sort of the Lion King moment of, ha, ma, 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 ma. And then the daughter was brought out. I may be wrong, but if nothing else, my mother raised me with great self-confidence to feel that that was probably what was happening. There have been a number of studies about how boys play and how girls play. Boys tend to want to climb the mountain. To climb the mountain, often you have to push others down. They tend to be more direct. A little boy will tell you, I'm going to get that ball because I'm better than you. Little girls, when they play, often want to make sure that everybody's good. They are wonderful collaborators. If somebody isn't comfortable doing something, your friend will stay back with you if you don't want to go into that door or into that room. If you're a little girl often. I'm generalizing. It's not always the case. But what I found in growing up with little boys is that I grew up with a very direct way of talking to people. If somebody wanted to go for a similar role that I was going for. If we were going for the yearbook editor, I made sure that I made it clear that I was going for it, and I thought I'd probably get it because I was pretty smart. Also, something that little girls don't always do is take credit for being really smart, really good at what they do. So these little boys, as I've gone through my career, have taken on different faces. These are my brothers and my cousins, but when I started to climb the ranks in the agency world, there were fewer women in the room, more men. And when I got to Twitter, I was often the only woman in the room. And it was those lessons that I learned in terms of how to interact with men more often than not that helped start my leadership journey. And so today I'm going to talk to you about how I found my own style. I'm going to talk to you about radical candor. And then I'm going to talk to you about what it means to be a female when we're leading. Because the elephant in the room, as we all know, is that if you're a woman, it's sometimes harder. When people talk about Fred Astaire being an amazing dancer, we've all heard it. Ginger Rogers had to do it backwards and in high heels. And as a female leader, we have to be just as thoughtful and mindful sometimes. So, leadership by authority. This is how I initially thought of leadership. Like many of you, I grew up having a lot of different leadership roles in school, and then when I got into the real world, I remember starting at my agency and looking at the career ladder, and what you see here is a typical agency career ladder. And it was very clear how you ascend. And when you were in the room, more often than not, you knew what the title was of everybody else in that room. And so you would see this sort of natural deference to the people who were higher up the rung. I don't actually think this is necessarily a good thing. There's a book called Creativity, Inc. It's written by one of the founders of Pixar, Ed Catmull. He's not the one who got fired for hugging people too much. It's the other guy. But he talks about how when Pixar first started, they would have these weekly creativity meetings, and they would review the current works in progress. And there was this table. And people would sit at the table, and depending on your leadership role, you were closer to the middle if you were more senior. And as their teams grew and they got bigger, there stopped being enough seats at the table. So they started to bring in chairs of rows so they could have rows behind the table so that more people could fit in the room. And no surprise, the more junior you were, the more likely you were to sit in one of the rows and probably further back from the table. The problem with this is that if you're doing a group discussion, it's a lot harder to hear the people in the back row. And guess what? If you're 22 years old, you are much less likely to raise your voice and say something, because that's a really intimidating dynamic. So they changed the room and they changed the table. Instead of having a rectangular table, they invested in getting a giant square table so that there was no middle, there was no dominant side, and everybody who needed to be in that room could sit at the table. No surprise, they started to see greater diversity of conversation, more ideas coming through, greater critiques happening, a better conversation. Some of the best ideas that I've gotten as a leader today have come from people who are lower down on the totem pole. And so I think about that often. Another lesson that I've learned in looking at this is that it requires humility. As you continue to move up and ascend, on one hand, you're incredibly proud. You have worked your tail off to get that title, and it's finally your turn to sit in that seat and be that voice in the room, the one that everybody is looking up to. The best leaders I know are people who throw that ego out the door. So there's a mentor of mine, a guy named Antonio Lucio. I met him 10 years ago when I had first started at Twitter. He was the CMO of Visa at the time. And our chief revenue officer came to me and asked me to meet with him. And I said, can you give me any context for this meeting? Why does he want to meet? And he said, I don't know. He didn't really say. He just said he needed to talk to somebody at Twitter and get some advice. And I thought you'd be a good person. Okay. So I sit down with him. Antonio has had a storied career. At this time, you should look him up. He's a legend. He's had a number of marketing roles. He's a great supporter of women. He's a mentor today, a good friend today. And I asked him, I said, why do you want to meet? And he said, I'm looking at the programs that are crossing my desk, and I'm not seeing enough innovation in them. And I think part of the reason why is because my team isn't learning new channels like yours. And I keep trying to push them and say, like, you gotta experiment here, you gotta join these things, but they're not doing it. And I think if I come in and learn as a leader what it is to be on Twitter and understand your platform and other platforms like yours, that people will follow. And so I come to you very humble. I know nothing. I need you to teach me everything. And so all of a sudden I'm the junior person in the room. I'm his mentor. And we spent 2 hours together talking about the space and what was happening and things that I'd seen other CMOs in his seat doing. And he learned a lot. Since then, the tables have flipped. I'm now learning from him. But what struck me was, here's a man in his late 50s, and he's still a student. And so we all need to continue to be students, which is why leadership by authority is one that I question a lot. When I left the agency world, again, my mindset is still like, this is how it's done. People have titles. You need to, defer to those people who are more junior and find space for them, but this is how it's done. I went to Twitter, and that's really what pushed me to move forward, to change. Because I got to this startup. We were a typical startup in that there wasn't a lot of organization in terms of how it was structured. If you think about some of the standard sort of HR protocols for titles and leveling and all of that, none of that existed. My title was a made-up title. I was doing 5 different teams roles, but those teams didn't exist yet. I was a team of 1. I had nobody reporting into me, so I couldn't even go into a room and said I had a lot of authority because, I've got this huge team. I was it. And to make matters even worse, when I got there, the team that I joined was not well liked. I could, in the first week, I could just sort of see people not wanting to interact with this group, and I couldn't figure out why. So I set a meeting with another leader at the company at the time, and I went to him and I said, Rob, I'm not sure people like the marketing team. And he looked at me and goes, they don't. And I said, okay. And I think they really don't like our leader. And he said, they hate her. And I said, okay, so I feel like that's going to make it hard for me to do my job here. They don't like my team and they don't like my leader. And he said, it's going to be really hard for you. I said, okay, super helpful, super helpful. Thank you for this talk. So I said, okay, I've never worked with a sales team. Help me understand, how should I work with them? And he said, you first need to understand that salespeople are very territorial. They do not want you talking to their people. And if you are talking to their people, you need to make sure that you inform them. And if you are talking to their people and you've informed them, you need to make sure that you're bringing value. You have to make it easier for them to sell. You have to make it easier for them to make more money. He said, you should probably read up on salespeople while you're at it. So I, of course, go to Google, and I'm looking, and I find this Harvard business study about the concept of challenger selling. And they had done this study where they looked at all kinds of different sellers and identified different types, different profile of people. And they found that there were different kinds of sales profiles and started to sort of categorize them to understand how they sold, and then evaluated them to see how successful they were. So the first type of salesperson is the relationship builder. This is the person who knows their contact, but also knows that they went on summer vacation, they know the name of their kids. They've got something personal there, and they've got this connection as a result. You also have your hard workers. Hard workers are probably making more calls than anybody else. They're working more hours at the office. They are going to do it just by sheer effort. You have your lone wolves. These are your brilliant cowboys. You're only going to do it their way or no way at all. They often work alone. And then you have your reactive problem solvers. From the client standpoint, reactive problem solvers are great. They're very detail-oriented. They tend to follow up really well. And then finally, you have your challengers. Challengers tend to be people who put themselves at risk, often by telling the client things they may not want to hear. Challengers are people who understand the client's business better than themselves. And so when they go in and sit across from them at the table, they're thinking about, how do I tell them how to do things differently so that they are better? No surprise, when you look at all the profiles, challengers tend to be the salespeople who do the best. And part of the reason why is because if you are challenging somebody, you are putting yourself at risk. You're running the chance that somebody is going to hear your negative feedback and then look negatively upon you because you've told them something they might not want to hear. The best challengers do it in such a way that people actually want to hear it. So I spent the next year at Twitter being a challenger to all the different teams that I was working with to help them find new ways to work, better ways to work. And it started to build my brand as a leader at the company, as somebody who would go in and say the hard thing, but make teams better. The beauty of working at a tech company is that 60% of the employee base is engineers, and as a rule almost, they tend to be designed to be challengers. That's how they get things done. So it was part of the culture, but me stepping into it and owning it as a leader probably helped me build a bunch of credibility in establishing those early relationships, because people knew that they could count on me to tell them the hard thing. This was working really well. I was growing my teams. I took on different roles based on the success of previous roles. And I was running a team at Twitter that was sort of our SEAL Team 6. I'd handpicked this group of people. They were working on our largest relationships with our global advertisers at the company. They'd come from diverse set of backgrounds. I specifically hired people that I felt were ambitious, who were thoughtful, who were curious about what was going on, who could bring sort of a broader worldview when they were sitting across from a CMO or a CEO and have a really thoughtful conversation. They were operators. I mean, these people were going to run the world someday. And I managed them accordingly. Something about leadership is that you'll notice there's this progression in organizations. The more junior you are, often people will ask you, who manages you? As you move up, it switches to, who do you report to? When you start reporting to people, you don't need to be managed every day. You're informing them. They're counting on you to make decisions based on the goals and visions that you've set. So I had hired people who were reporting to me. And I was tough on them. I expected a lot from them. They knew our goals. We wanted to outpace the rest of the company in terms of how we were growing, what we were doing. We wanted to set a North Star that other people would follow in terms of how we work, how we talk, how we walk. And we performed accordingly. It was the highest performing team at the company. When we did it's an exercise we do called critical talent review, where typically a leader is asked to pick 20% of their team that is deemed critical talent. My leader came to me and said, your entire team is critical talent, 100%. We were the only team to get that. So they were doing very, very well. And I was feeling really good about what I was doing at the company. I thought I would get promoted. So it came time for the review cycle, and I'm all excited. I'm sitting down with my boss, and he looks at me and he says, we can't promote you this cycle. It felt awful. I said, why? What's going on? He said, well, I'm reading the feedback, and we have a bit of an issue. You have some members of your team who really like your style, but there are some who feel it's not working for them. They want you to be more nurturing. They want you to come into the Monday meetings and talk more about what you were up to that weekend. They want to know more about who you are as a person, about your family, and they just want to understand you better, and you need to be a little bit softer with them. You can imagine what was in my head as I heard this feedback. And here's the thing. This came from a leader who has been an amazing sponsor for me at the company. I give him a ton of credit for putting me in rooms and putting me in situations and giving me raises and things that a lot of other leaders before him had not given me. But this was the feedback. So we hired an executive. We're very lucky. At Twitter, we get executive coaches. So they hired an executive coach, an amazing woman named Susanna Baldwin. And we sat down and looked at it. And she said, I'm going to interview every member of your team, and I'm going to come back to you. And let's process this together. So she talked to everybody on the team. And she came back and she said, the problem is it's a little bit like an elephant. You have some people who are over here who really like your style, and then there are some people who want you to be nurturing. They want more of a, this is true, motherly relationship with you. And I looked at her and I said, here's the hard thing. I know when you get feedback, you have to hear it, you have to consume it, you have to find a better way to do it. But I do not want to change my leadership style. It's working. They're not telling me that I'm bullying them. They're not raising the flags that HR gets concerned about. They're coming to me and asking me to do things that I don't want to actually share my personal life. I like to keep things separate. We got to find a better way to do this. Do you agree? Am I off base here? And she said, you're not wrong. You have a perception problem. They have to understand where you're coming from. And she said, until you do that, you are probably not going to have a team that is operating at its optimal level. I said, fair. Google did a study where they were trying to understand what drove the highest performing teams. They looked at things like Myers-Briggs. They looked at pulling different functions together and having diversity of thought in that regard. They looked at, the ways in which they meet and ways in which they talk. And what they found is that the highest performing teams have one thing in common. There's a feeling of psychological safety. If everybody in the room feels safe, then they are more likely to offer crazy ideas. They're more likely to offer critiques. And if you're hearing a critique, because you know it's coming from a well-intentioned place, you are more likely to listen to it. What you see is greater conversations, more diverse, more discussion, better ideas, better work. And the fact that my team felt like they weren't necessarily in a place where they could trust me as a leader because I wasn't giving them what they needed was an issue. So what we did is I ultimately went to the team and I put my cards on the table. I said, I just got this tough feedback from this group. Susanna spoke to all of you to understand it because I really want to understand where you're coming from. What I've heard is that everybody here feels differently about how I lead. Some of you love it. Some of you want me to be better. Regardless, I want to be better. Let me help you understand why I lead the way in which I lead. All of you have told me what you want to be someday. All of you want to run some part of the world someday. And so I am managing you as somebody who I have got the highest expectations of. I hired you because I think you're amazing. If you're just doing your job, if you're hitting the goals that we've set, the very ambitious goals, then that's you delivering on what I expected. But if you want to run part of the world someday, it's my job as a leader to continually be looking at your work and you and finding ways to make it better. So you're going to hear me answer the question all the time, how do we make this better? But it's coming from a place that actually is really anchored in what I want you to do and who I want you to be. On the personal side and wanting to know about my social life, basically I brought 10 books that I really love and explained why. I never told them about my social life. Anyway, it had a great impact. The team really leaned in, and I at the very end of the conversation, I said, for any of you who need something more, I will meet with you, and you need to tell me what you individually need. I can adjust here if that's a necessary thing. But after the team hearing my rationale and how I thought about it, the net was, as I met with each of them individually, everybody was okay. They were ready to move forward. And that's kind of the genesis of radical candor. Not genesis, I shouldn't say that. It was actually created by somebody else. What I'll say is that's where I realized that radical candor is something that's really important to my own leadership style. So what is radical candor? It's the ability to challenge directly and show you care personally at the same time. Kim Scott is another executive coach at Twitter. At one point in time, she's now an author who wrote the book on radical candor. And she frames it up in this way. So on one axis, you have care personally, and on the other axis, you have challenge directly. So obnoxious aggression is when you challenge, but you don't care. So somebody who's being obnoxiously aggressive might say, that was a terrible meeting. I don't know why you said it like that. Rough. Ruinous empathy is when you care a lot, but you don't challenge. So people who are ruinously empathetic are people who are non-specific in their praise, and they tend to sugarcoat the hard stuff. The problem with being non-specific in your praise is that if you said somebody does a good job and they came out of a meeting, they're not necessarily sure what drove that. There's this concept called bright spots. Find the bright spots and repeat those. It's really hard to repeat an entire meeting. So being really specific of what worked and what you want them to do over and over again is very helpful. The problem with sugarcoating the hard stuff is that people don't always get the message. How many of you have ever given a review to somebody where you really needed to land the plane on how they need to get better, but you gave them what's called as, forgive my language, a shit sandwich? You said, you're doing so great. You're such a good member of the team. Here's the thing, like, we need you to start showing up 5 days a week, but everything else is so good, keep killing it. And that person walks away and they think they're killing it and they only show up on Tuesdays. That's what happens when you have ruinous empathy. The last is the worst, which is manipulative insincerity. And these people are pretty well, they don't care and they do not challenge directly. So you're just gonna get a lot of non-specific things and you don't want them on your team. Radical candor is where you wanna be again. Challenge directly, show that you care personally. Much harder to do when you are female. So, there was a study done, this was actually done in the 20s. BEM-sex role inventories, what it's called, BSRI for shorthand. They basically looked at 60 different characteristics for men and women to determine what's optimal. And if you're a man, the things in orange are what we like to see from men. Leadership ability, assertive, analytical, dominant, strong personality. There are more. Athletic is one of them. If you're in the pink, that's what they wanted from women. They wanted sensitive to others, warm, sympathetic, loyal, doesn't use harsh language, no swearing, fuck. That has changed over time, but the core elements of this are true still today when you look at norms and how people operate. So, true story, I had been at Twitter at this point 2 years. One of the things that they would have me do often, going backwards, one of the things that they would often have me do is meet with big brands and go in and give them a bunch of feedback, challenger selling. So I would meet with Coca-Cola or Apple or Samsung, and I would just not destroy them, but I would really take apart everything that they were doing, and I would tell them why and, tell them how to get better. And a leader at the company pulled me aside after one of the sessions. And by the way, these sessions were so popular, we could not do enough. There were not enough hours in the week to get them all done because we saw the brands really react very well and they'd get better. All the same, this executive pulled me aside and pulled me into a room and he said, I'm going to give you some feedback. You have to change how you're doing these sessions. And I said, okay, sure, absolutely. Tell me, what can I do? And he said, you sound like you're scolding them. You need to lower your voice, say it nicer, smile more. It's going to go over better. Trust me. And I said, okay. He said, so let's practice. Let's go through some of this. Say what you said on this point and repeat it back to me. So I said, you should probably do it like this, and not like that. And I just, all of a sudden I became this limp milquetoast person. And and he said, no, do it again, one more time. So I did it again. In my head, you can imagine what I'm saying, fuck. So I did it again. He said, okay, keep working on it. I'd recommend you go home, just stand in front of the mirror and do it. Okay. I didn't change it at all. Kept doing the meetings the same way. Guess what? The meetings were still successful. I asked other people, should I change my tone? Would you pay attention to it? Other people were fine with it, but it's a thing. It's just a reality. And so over my 10 years at Twitter, as much as I wanted to go into the room and bring my full self, be that little girl with the boys, I still had to acknowledge I'm a woman and I need people to listen to me. I need them to pay attention and I need to get my point across. So 2 stories. One time I was hosting a group of people from a country that is very dominated by men in terms of who's running the world there. There were 4 women from that country in the room, and then 66 men. And one of the guys asked a question, and before I could answer it, another guy started to answer the question. And then before I could jump in there, another guy said, no. And before you know it, you have 8 men sort of debating across the room, and nobody is listening to me. And so finally, I just banged a shoe on the table, literally took my shoe off, banged it on the table, and said, and the room went quiet, and I said, I'm pretty sure I am the only person in this room who can answer this question. Do you want to hear it from me? Can I hear it from the ladies in the back? And the women in the back, the 4 women were like, yeah! And so I told them the answer, and it was the right one because I worked at Twitter and I knew the answer. But sometimes you have to be humorous and you got to be dramatic. So I learned to bring humor into my conversations. I did learn to smile sometimes when I'd say things. I learned how to be really direct when it mattered. I really thought about how I was going to conduct a meeting, the amount of time that I would agitate over it, because I knew that I would be in a group of people where I'd probably get interrupted a lot, be, different dynamics going on in terms of who's in charge, and I was trying to think of how am I going to land the points I want to make, because I have points to make. This is what's called being an alpha female. So there's a linguist, or sociolinguist out of Great Britain. She's done studies on women who she termed alpha females and how they do this. And what they do is, I'm going to read this to you, embracing the masculine while skillfully preserving their identities as women. Alpha females judiciously draw on both masculine and feminine styles of language to create the right impact for their teams. I don't think I realized consciously that this is something I was doing until I was at an event, and my boss at the time came to me and said, I have somebody I really want you to meet. This is Colleen DeCourcy. She's the chief creative director for Wieden+Kennedy. She's a baller. She's responsible for probably some of the most memorable advertising campaigns that you've seen. She's one of the very few female creative directors in the world. And I said, I of course know who you are. I'm honored to be talking to you. I love your work. And she looked at me right before we went to go sit down. She said, come here for a second. So we went to the corner. She said, I've met you. She said, we've been in the room together. You might not remember this, but about 3 years ago after I got the role, I did a tour of Silicon Valley with the other agency leads, and we came to Twitter, and you were the only woman in the room with 10 other men. And I watched you jump hurdles and leapfrog and use humor and push and use all these different techniques to say the thing that needed to be said. And I so related to what you were doing because that's what I do. You were steering the ship through the eddies of this crazy river, trying to get it to where you needed it to get to. I hope you realize that's what you do. You need to pay attention to that because you were really good in that meeting. And I still talk to people about doing my tour of Silicon Valley and seeing all these people, and there was this one woman who was doing everything she could to make the point, and they were the best points in the room. That was you. By the way, it's really uncomfortable to share like positive things that come at you because I know I sounded cocky at the beginning, but still, you have your moments. But it was this light bulb of, right, that's what you have to do. So you really have to think about it before you go into these rooms. Every Wednesday, there is a meeting at Twitter where we meet with our CEO and our CFO. And by the way, yes, there's a lot going on at Twitter. We're not going to talk about any of it right now. We have a new CEO, and he's great, really. Seriously. And in this meeting, each regional VP has to spend time talking about their corner of the world. And in my case, I'm talking about the revenue, but I'm also talking about the upcoming Brazil election. And it's a pretty focused conversation. There's about 65 people in this meeting. About 20% are female. And it's a meeting where we're saying a lot of hard things often. We're having really robust discussions. There's often jokes going on because we do actually have a really good culture in terms of using humor in the culture. But I know that I'm talking to a bunch of people where numbers are the most important thing. So I come in prepared to every meeting knowing in my pocket What are the numbers that are going to land what I need to land? We're the fastest growing region in the world. We're the furthest ahead in our 3-year plan. This product is failing us by 20%. I go in with the hard data, and then I'm also using humor and making my points and doing other things in other ways so that they're hopefully going to listen. Often when we talk about leadership, we're talking about the people below us, the people in our org. Leadership is just as much about what you represent to your peers and the people above you as you represent that org. So the concept of radical candor isn't just about how you manage your people, it's also how you represent. People know I care deeply about what I do, but I'm always going to be extremely, extremely direct. This is called threading the needle. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So what I'd ask of all of you is the next time you're going into a meeting or a conversation, I know I've spoken about this with the dynamics of being the only woman often in the room, but here's the thing, often women are just as judgmental of other women. So every meeting, you need to bring this in. That tough feedback that I got where people wanted me to be more motherly, and half of that was coming from women. So think about that as you're thinking about the language you choose, and think about that as you think about the language that you're hearing. We're all trying to thread the needle. Just to recap, a couple of things. Find your style. This was my style. This is how I've evolved. Again, I hope I keep evolving. This idea of self-awareness never goes away. I was having to do a really tough talk with my team at one point. It was right after we saw a number of tough events happen in the country. Black Lives Matter was sort of exploding, and the team wanted me to come and speak to them about these issues. Twitter really believes that we should represent the people on our platform. We're a pretty diverse group of people on our platform, and I felt very uncomfortable leading this conversation as a pretty privileged white female. The balance of that was that we often ask the people who represent those communities to be the ones to sort of step forward, and at a time when their hearts are probably the heaviest. So I felt like I couldn't necessarily put forward some of our people of color to talk about the experience. So I had to host this discussion, and right beforehand I called somebody who's in my kitchen cabinet. She's our international head of legal. She happens to be a woman of color. And I said, I need to do this conversation. Here's how I'm thinking about doing it. Give me feedback. Tell me how I can make it better. And she gave me a lot of great advice. But her number one piece of advice is, if I were you, I would be very transparent to the team about why you have to have this conversation, why it's hard for you, and you need to invite them to give you feedback. You'll get better and better as you do this. This will not be the only conversation you have. So this idea of self-awareness and bringing people into it, reflecting back to them how you're reading the room, did I get that right? Please tell me how I can be better, is one of the most important things I've found as I've figured out how I can be better. The more senior you get, the harder it is for people to tell you how you can be better. So I asked this question, what's one thing I can do better next time? You'll get better and you'll get the feedback. Second, radical candor. Challenge directly. Show them how you care personally. The best leaders I know do this really well. And I'd say sometimes with leadership, it can feel like it's about the individual. Your name and lights, your glory. If you as a leader can consciously always be thinking about how do I make this about them, the team, and their excellence, they will get behind that. If it's about you, you lose the plot. Things go sideways. It becomes less interesting to people. So always sort of bringing that from behind is really critical. And then the last is thread the needle. Never forget that you're a woman. It's probably giving you some of your greatest strengths. It's why you're so good at your job. But there's a lot that we have to deal with. And there's a lot of bias. And so just understanding the bias and then acting accordingly can help you a lot. One of the first things I do when I take on a new person is we sit across from each other and I ask them, what do you need to succeed? Your job as a leader is to create an environment where people thrive, where they do their best work. So they tell me, and then I say, here's what I need from you. I am extremely direct. And the reason why is because I actually want you to really understand what matters to me. The problem with that sometimes is that I do not read the tea leaves. I don't deal well with subtlety. I need you to be extremely direct with me, because if you do something halfway or you sugarcoat it, I'm going to keep moving and I'm not going to see it. So know that if you can be that way with me, it will make me a better leader. But also know that when I'm being extremely direct, it's coming from a place of, I want to see you thrive. And if I'm ever delivering it in such a way that doesn't work, tell me. But I'm always going to try to be honest and open and direct with you. But it's because I care. We have that conversation. I remind them as we continue to work together. You can tell people something once. You have to keep reminding them. And then they tend to get there. So anyway, I mentioned 2 books that I generally don't read business books. I think they're really boring. But I really recommend these 2. Both, in full disclosure, were written by people who have coached executives at Twitter and Google and Apple and other companies. Kim Scott wrote Radical Candor. There's a lot more there. Highly suggest it. And then Women, Language, and Power. The cover isn't great. I've given Susanna this feedback. But the book is excellent. I've been working for 20-some years, and I thought I had it, and I found so many things in it that have made me better. So highly recommend that you read both of these, because we're never done learning. We're still a work in progress. And if you have any feedback, tell me one thing when I'm mingling later on today. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Okay, give it up one more time for Melissa Barnes. Thank you, Melissa. Full disclosure, I'm like fangirling over her, but we go back many, many years, back to those Missouri J School days, and so it's been amazing to watch her career, and I'm so thankful that you came to 417 land, kind of with a lot of other things going on. So thank you for being here. That was such an awesome message, so relevant to so many of us in the room. We have our first break coming up. So I want to talk to you about finding the point of connection. We talked about that. And I want to say the second thing, and it's so funny because you actually said this same turn of phrase. The second thing I learned about being the new girl is to always be more interested than interesting. And it's funny that you said that exact thing. So when you're being interested in someone, you're not making it about you. You're making it about them. And I am naturally curious about other people, so that comes easily to me. I really do want to know all the things. It doesn't come naturally to everyone. And so when you're meeting someone new, if you're more interested than interesting, you're going to learn a lot more. You're going to build that connection, and you're going to make a new friend. So as we go into this first break, we have a 20-minute break. Find someone new, point of connection, more interested than interesting. Hopefully you find a stranger and turn them into a friend. We'll see you back here in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Pick yourself up and dust yourself off and back in the saddle. You're on the front line, everyone's watching. You know it's serious, we're getting closer, this isn't over. The pressure's on, you feel it, but you got it all, believe it. When you fold it up, oh, oh, and if you fold it up, eh, tamina, mina, sangalewa. Cause this is Africa, tamina, mina, waka, waka, tamina, mina, sangalewa. This time for Africa. for Africa. Samina, mina, waka, waka, Samina, mina, sakalewa, anawa, Samina, mina, waka, waka, Samina, mina, sakalewa. It's time for Africa.
I'm well on my journey, biggie, biggie mama, 1 A to Z. Party, so on my journey, biggie, biggie mama, from east to west. Party, waka, waka, my waka, waka, my Sangin' since summer, Zimbabwe, 'cause this is Africa.
Samina, mina, anawa, samina, mina, samina, mina, anawa,
Samina, mina, waka, waka, Samina, mina, sakalewa, anawa, Samina, mina, waka, waka, Samina, mina, sakalewa. This time for Africa. Jungle, jungle, Samina, mina, sakalewa, anawa,
If I'd have known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me. Oh, now go. Live without you. I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong. And I grew strong. And I learned how